Hi guys, Osmo here, and let's jump straight into the manifesto for the game balance in Path of Exile Expedition, which is the 3.15 patch. I'm gonna also try to do like a TLDR version so that we can see which are the most important changes. So the general idea is that they want to slow down the pace of the game and lower the player damage pretty much at all levels, because they're gonna be buffing some early monsters and then lowering the damage at later levels, but we'll see exactly what's in here. So the great support gem reduction. So let's see which gems. Is there like a list of the gems actually? Here's just an example. I don't think they have all of them listed, but oh wait, faster projectiles, that's actually interesting to me. Now grants further increase to projectile speed instead of attack and cast speed, with divergent quality becoming increased damage instead. Okay, that's not a big change actually. The gem just does more of what it says, because that's gonna be one of the builds that I'm gonna be playing, and most likely it's not nerfed in here, which is kind of silly, which is something that I'll get to, because even though this is like the great nerf patch, I think there are not enough nerfs, and I'm gonna explain that in a bit. So let's see. For a while we've been concerned with power gap between support gems. There are gems that grant huge multiplicative damage bonuses. Yeah, so something like controlled distraction, elemental focus, things like that. Things that, for example, spell echo, right? Multi-strike, these things just increase the damage so much that people are not using other gems. So they're basically way stronger, and because the damage is kind of misleading, right? Because you might have a gem that is like 40, like let's say here, right, 48% more damage, and then there's another gem that has 45% more damage, but that 3% of more damage multiplier is actually massive when it comes to the late game. It can be like so much damage. It can be millions of damage once you scale and min-max the character enough. So this is a very big deal, and this is something that I called for in one of my previous videos. I was saying that if they ever wanna like make the game slow down, if they wanna ever effectively slow down the pace of the game, they have to buff the base damages and lower the multipliers, and seems like they're doing just that. Some of the like physical, like melee skills have either the same base damage or maybe slightly buffed, but the spells will have lowered base damage, or maybe stay on the same base damage. I think they said spells are gonna have like kind of the same base damage, but the melee skills are gonna have buffed base damage, just to put them more in line. But all of the multipliers for all of the skills basically are getting lowered, which means less exponential scaling, which means less gap between the strongest skills or the most scaled build versus the like just a beginner version of it, or like a basic version of it, which right now is a good thing, because this gap is way too insane to be ever able to like manage the pace of the game in any like relevant way. So this is something that they have to do in order to be even able to begin trying to attempt controlling the pace of the game. Without that, they can't do shit. So this is a change that had to happen, and I agree with this one. This is something that I don't mind, like just less multipliers in general, because they are exponential in the way they work. So this is actually very reasonable change. A couple of existing supports had downsides added. Yeah, so they added some downsides. So for example, like there were skills like melee physical damage. It was definitely a gem that you basically added to everything. It was like the best physical melee damage, to the point where you added to minions, added to attacks, added to everything that deals physical damage like that with melee attacks. And there were basically like no other options before putting this gem in. So adding some downside makes sense, because it makes it focused on like just the amount of damage instead of the DPS or speed, right? So this is more for like hard hitting skills. So for example, yeah, like earthquake bleed and stuff like that. So they're definitely like the skill gems and supports are going to be more balanced in general. I think there still might be some outliers. We'll see what actually they missed, because they usually miss some things. But it should make the difference between builds that are scaled to the extreme versus the builds that are not as well done or not as well progressed slightly smaller, which I think in general is a good thing. I think there should be a difference, but not as insane as it is right now. Many trap gems haven't been adjusted, which means if they say by the way, if you're reading this manifesto and they say that something has not been changed, that means that it's gonna be stronger in relation to other things, because other things are gonna be nerfed. So traps actually very viable starter. If you wanna start with an ice trapper, for example, ice trap is gonna be very, very good. For sure, Ice Trap is gonna be one of the better builds, like Ice Trap Saboteur, to start with. It has a pretty easy time killing all the bosses. It's very cheap. It does insane damage. It just is pretty squishy and takes a little bit of adjustments to learn how to play without dying all the time. But in general, it's very, very strong. It's insane amount of damage. Okay. They also change Seismic Cry. Yeah, so actually nice. So they actually buffed skill gems that are weaker. Increased critical damage might become more popular. This is actually quite a big multiplier. We might see some builds who are using this now actually. Different changes to Archmage. Spell cost 5 instead of 6. So this is a buff. This will signal. Oh no, sorry, this is a nerf because less mana, less damage. Yeah, so just less damage for Archmage. Yeah, Archmage was still very, very strong. It did deserve kind of a nerf. And what about Chain? What's changed about the Chain? Changed quality bonuses for a variety of support gems. Example, greater multi-projectile damage instead of attack and cast speed. That is not necessarily a good thing, actually. that is not necessarily actually what people would want, but that's fine. Chain now gives increased chaining range instead of projectile speed. That's very nice. That's actually a good change. Chaining range is very hard to get, but it's very nice to have in your build when you're using something that chains. So that is actually pretty nice. Okay, what else do we have? Flask system rework. So most utility flasks and unique flasks have been rebalanced. We're gonna have to see the patch notes to see exactly what has been changed and in what way. Some flasks probably are gonna be not changed. Expect a lot less permanent power from flasks. Flasks that provide raw defense or raw power are the ones with biggest nerfs. So probably roomies have been nerfed most likely. Some flasks are selectively buffed a bit if they were underpowered or less popular. The Expedition expansion, there are now 3 ways that you can use your flasks. You can either continue to use the rebalanced ones the traditional way, or you can apply one of 2 new types of currency, Instilling and Enkindling Orbs. Drop as part of regular drop pool from regular monsters and chests, so you're just gonna be normally finding them. Instilling Orb will cause the flask to be automatically used upon specific condition, for example when the charges become full, or when you become affected by Ignite. So this is allowing you to automate the flasks. And as usual, when GGG is faced with a problem to solve, they just make a currency item for it. It's like, oh, players need to do this thing. Okay, let's make an orb that does it, and that's exactly what they did. So you can basically make a flask trigger when you're low health, probably when you're low mana, maybe when you're stationary. That would be nice if you could trigger if you're like stationary or something. When you're full on charges, maybe you can trigger it when you cast a specific spell or attack or something, or maybe when you use a movement skill. This would be interesting to see, like, what are the different things. But yeah, when you're affected by different ailments, and that's probably gonna be these also might be different depending on the flask. Like some utility flasks might have different conditions than others, but that is very nice because this will basically automate some flasks. So what you're gonna try to do is like get as much duration as you can, and then probably make them trigger when it's full or something, or yeah, something like that. This is gonna be very, very nice, and it's gonna save you some clicking and flask spamming. So I think a lot of people are going to take advantage of that. And then Enkindling Orb prevents utility flask from gaining charges while active, but provides a big boost to their effect, duration, or various ways to interact with their charges. This is basically a bossing enchant for a flask. Basically, when you're fighting bosses, you are not gaining charges usually, because there are usually like no adds. Let's say you're doing like an awakener or something, right? You will have very limited flask charges, but they will have bigger effect, bigger duration, and also many different ways that interacts with their charges. So that might be something that you want to do on a bossing character. When Flask removes a curse, it no longer applies a period of immunity to curses. Flasks that remove ailments now only provide a period of immunity to that ailment if they actually removed it. That means you cannot pre-flask to be like always immune to freeze. You will have to either press freeze removal flask, or most likely just use the instilling orb, and on the flask that has freeze removal you will have to put that. So that's basically adding another micromanagement thing to do on your flasks. People usually neglect flasks when people send me like builds to review. Usually the first thing I tell them is like fix your flasks, because it's really simple to do and very, very powerful. And it's probably gonna still be like that. People still gonna probably neglect them, and this actually will probably make it so there's a bigger difference between people who really min-max their flasks versus people who just use whatever they find or something. So you cannot just spam the flasks and be permanently immune to ignite. If you want permanent mitigation for ailments, there are other options for your build, which they actually are removing as well. Now that we have rebalanced ailment mitigation in general, so that there aren't a few options that completely outclass the rest. Okay, monster density in Path of Exile gets a lot higher if you play through the game. When we initially released Balanced Flask generation, okay, so the further you go in the game, the monster density increases, but the flask charges gained per monsters are getting lower. So Act 6 to 10 you get a bit less, and then in maps you get even less flask charges, but that's because you're gonna be getting more monsters, so it should be more consistent throughout the game in terms of like how many flask charges you're getting, which is fine. A lot of flasks are reworked. There's also a Diamond Flask nerf. This is a massive nerf. This is like an actual insane nerf, to the point where this will be not used as much. Instead of critical strikes are lucky, we get 100% increased critical strike chance, which is actually quite bad. Like this is gonna give you it's gonna give you like 6% crit, let's say, right? I think this is gonna give you like 6% crit, and previously if you were at 50% it gave you 25% crit, right? So from like max 25% crit, if you optimize it, to 6% crit, this is a pretty steep nerf to that flask. So definitely big nerf to Diamond Flask. And if you're like relying on critical strikes, it's still gonna be a nice damage boost if you have a good critical strike multiplier, but it's not gonna be just like a no-brainer to take whenever you are playing a build that can crit. They changed, Coruscating Elixir, what? Fire res, less fire damage taken, increased duration, removes all but one life on use. So was it 15.5 seconds with this duration? So this is that's a huge increase, but that's because the gains no charges during flask effect. But you can use it with some other flasks, right? Aren't there other flasks that make other flasks not use charges? And that flask gains charges? Yeah, so you can use that. You can combine it with another flask. You can actually have like perma Coruscating Elixir. Pretty sure people are gonna do that now. I mean, if this is 15.5, so if you get it to like 26%, actually you can even get 30 now, right? With the like Hillock in research, while you're doing Katarina or something, at least like 28, I think. So that means you have almost 20 seconds of a flask. like that's not including any flask duration on your tree or anything like that. And then you can basically play Pathfinder and have this on permanently, like low life, cast spells. Yeah, that's actually pretty cool. That's definitely a much longer duration. Not to mention that you're gonna be taking 20% less fire damage and have 50% fire res. So if you can sustain something like that permanently, even though like it seems like you couldn't, right, just with this flask alone, but with the use of other flasks, you can do a lot of cool stuff here. So there's gonna be a lot of probably broken interaction with flasks that they're gonna miss as well, that we'll see. So that's very, very nice. So there's gonna be tons of different flasks to watch out, and new combinations and new metas probably will develop around that. So that's actually really interesting. I like that the flasks are being changed. I'm not sure if I agree exactly with that way, but I like that there's some automation added to it, because people are already automating flasks. So giving players some like a legal way of automating flasks, I think, is making it more fair for everybody. Because some people, you know, don't want to risk getting banned for using something that automates flasks, and this is making it basically available to everyone by using an orb. So yeah, that's basically what they're doing. But very, very nice. Actually, I like the flask changes pretty much as they are here. We have also added 45% increased duration passive tree, lowering the amount given by cluster jewel notables. This combination of mechanic has implications with certain belt. Soul Thirst Replica Roomies has a huge duration reduction. Replica Roomies has a huge duration reduction, but with the Enkindling Orb effect can nullify this, providing massive defense if you can cancel the slowing effect. Yeah, so Replica Roomies, I mean, isn't it gonna get nerfed? I mean, if they're not nerfing Replica Roomies, that's definitely gonna be something that people are gonna be using, because it's absolutely insane. So yeah, you can use like Replica Roomies with Coruscating Elixir as well. Yeah, the way I look at this, with the use of the Overflowing Chalice maybe to like quickly regain flask charges, there might be some really broken flask combos actually. Like especially also with the, like the Val skill flasks. This might be very, very interesting to see. There are so many combinations I think that you're gonna be able to use here, because I think these are not gonna get nerfed, because they're not like just pure damage and defense, which is what's gonna get nerfed. Like probably like Lion's Roar maybe is gonna get nerfed to like maybe 15 to 20% more face damage or something, right? So things like that might get nerfed, but I don't see these guys getting nerfed. So there might be some really interesting stuff to do with the flasks. Okay. Players ailment mitigation, relevant section from live stream. Okay, in addition to reworking how players mitigate ailments in other ways, the intent here is there shouldn't be a simple low investment option for your characters to mitigate every single ailment. You should focus on mitigating the effects you're most threatened by. Yeah, you're I mean, in this game you're most threatened by all of them. Like Bleed can completely destroy you, Freeze can completely destroy you, Ignite can completely destroy you by how like some monsters have a like insane multiplier to the point where you get hit by something that pretty much doesn't do any damage to you, but the bleed is gonna melt you in 3 seconds. So you need to be able to remove that. Poison as well, like the Alhazmin Conqueror. Yeah, everything is like shock as well, multiplying the damage so that when you're getting hit by multiple sources of damage, you're just gonna get one shot. Every ailment is important, which is why it's so important to get ailment immunity to the point that people like just craft their gear with ailment immunity in hardcore, so that to guarantee just being immune to all ailments at all times on all characters. So this is I feel like this is a case of it's kind of tedious in my opinion. Like it's like adding layers and layers and layers of mechanics that the player has to worry about if they want to play in hardcore, for example, right? Because if you want to play in softcore, it's like whatever, who cares? But if you want to play in hardcore, it's like adding so much stuff that you need to take care of. Like basically the checklist of the shit that you need to do is getting longer and longer and more tedious actually to do as well, which I'm not a big fan of. I would prefer a little bit more like linear progression. I prefer the progression of like harvest crafting your items so that you become more powerful and more tanky that way. But the game has kind of like the balance all out of whack, so they have to do weird shit like that, kind of. You should focus on mitigating effects you're most certain by. Yeah, for example, the change to Aquamarine Flask, reduce the effect of freeze, will let you to continue to act while frozen without mitigating it entirely. If you craft Aquamarine Flask to maximize Flask effect, you can reduce the freeze to the point of being mostly ignored. And that kind of makes it so it kind of counteracts everything they just said. Like, if you can have a flask that has just just puts reduced freeze effect on you, and let's say you make it like 80% reduced freeze effect, and then let's do it for other ailments as well, right? That effectively means you have like an ailment immunity through that by just pressing the buttons, and it's just automatic and you don't have to think about it. So the very thing that they wanted to remove from the game, just have these flasks up and you don't have to worry about anything, they're also adding back to the game at the same time in another form, sounds like, which is very weird. Again, sounds like kind of a disconnect between what they're trying to do and what they're actually doing. But we'll see how it works in practice. Maybe I actually can't get these flasks to work that well, or maybe the sacrifice of running maybe these flasks are too bad like in other ways and don't do anything else, so that you actually don't want to run them. We'll see. Most Ascendancy skills that mitigated all ailments now provide partial or no mitigation. Raider now grants 50% chance to avoid elemental ailments while phasing instead of full elemental immunity. So you will have to get 50% chance to avoid elemental ailments from some other sources. That means maybe like gloves and boots or something, or chest or helmet. I think those are the places where you can get it. So you're gonna have to get it somewhere on the gear, and then you're gonna be immune. So basically you need like 2 mods, like on 2 items. Hierophant Pathfinder retains some of the level of mitigation. Oh, Inquisitor no longer has any. That was like the reason to play Inquisitor. I feel like Inquisitor is gonna be just super underrepresented. Like there's a helmet that adds Battle Mage, so you don't have to play Inquisitor to get the Battle Mage thing if you wanna play with that. So there's like no reason to play Inquisitor anymore. That is so weird. Inquisitor is so bad now. If they are not buffing Inquisitor in any other way, it seems like a dead Ascendancy now. Elementalist no longer has ailment immunity. That seems... what? Why? Okay. Ascendancy passes that provide elemental ailment mitigation were sufficiently powerful without it. Much higher gear and passive skill investment to gain immunity to ailment. Make it more reasonable to focus on mitigating the specific ailments. Nobody's gonna do that though. Like, they can try all they want, but nobody's gonna do that. Nobody's gonna be like, oh, I'm gonna make this character immune to freeze, because you know what? I totally only encounter freeze, and that's the thing that's dangerous to my character. No, you don't build elemental ailments because that's immunity, because that's dangerous to your character. You build it because that's what the monsters do. If the monsters inflict all ailments, you need immunity to all ailments, because all ailments can actually just cause you to die. So this is never gonna happen. This is never... oh my god. They do this all the time. They have an idea and they are like stuck with it. Like, players are supposed to play like this, not like that. Because reasons. The game entirely dictates how you're supposed to play, right? There are things that kill you. All of them can kill you. You want to deal with all of them, right? It's like, no, we want players to pick. Like, why? That's so fucking dumb. Like, no, nobody's gonna do that. Nobody's ever gonna fucking do that. Like, everybody who's playing hardcore is gonna make sure that now they just spend a couple more passives and get ailment immunity to all ailments at once. They will still be doing that. That's the goal. That's what they have to do. Otherwise, they risk dying. So this is just not something that will ever work. Like, no matter how much they nerf it, people will always want in hardcore ailment immunity to all ailments through whatever means they can get it. This makes no sense at all. We want to provide new avenues for players to mitigate bleed, corrupted blood, and curses, given how common bleed, curse removal flasks were. As a result, we have added extra support to the passive skill tree to mitigate bleeding, corrupted blood, and curses through new stats on existing notables or a new passive cluster. We've also made minor changes to Pantheon powers. The upgraded Soul of Ralakesh grants you cannot gain corrupted blood while there are at least 5 corrupted blood stacks on you, and 20% reduced curse effect on you, replacing previous bonuses. This is actually nice to be able to pick up from a Pantheon, but not for the reason that they're saying, but actually to play like a Soul Mantle Totem thing, you know, just the reduced effect of curses. This should actually be very helpful to that build, so that's very nice. Poisons now inherently deal 50% more damage. We didn't like that poison builds felt pigeonholed into playing assassins due to extremely strong poison related bonuses and relied heavily on Corralito's signature unique flasks in the late game. 100% agree. I 100% agree with this one. Assassin was just completely dumb in the sense that you want to deal damage with poison, play assassin. You want to deal damage with hits, play assassin. Like, you want to go fast, play assassin. Physical spells, play assassin. Elemental spells, play assassin. Like, everything was the best on assassin in terms of the damage. So this is 100% justified. I definitely like that. And yes, poison was very underwhelming in terms of other classes, so I feel like this now will open possibilities for other builds, especially something like a Pathfinder. So Pathfinder with poison or Occultist with poison might be definitely stronger right now. Definitely like this change. Reduced as power of Assassin's Poison Notable to be more in line with the kind of damage increased Ascendancy usually gives. No longer 30% dot multi. And increased poison duration is capped at 100%. Toxic delivery has poison, and flake. Okay, yeah. So this is now more reasonable. It's still good to play poisons on an assassin, but it's no longer like the only option, because the problem with poisons is that you need to reach a certain breakpoint of damage. Otherwise, it doesn't feel good to play, and it was much easier to do that with an assassin, so you just played assassin, right? If you wanted to play like Cobra Lash Poison, you would never not play an assassin, right? I feel you still don't play a non-assassin with that specific build because you got a crit, so 25% more damage. I mean, you know, you still take that over other things, and you still take the poison, 100% poison duration. It's still good, but now you can at least consider other options because the build will feel much better in the beginning. This also means that the lesser poison support is gonna be stronger, right? So classes that start with lesser poison, so if you're like starting with a shadow and you're starting in the early game and you're just leveling, the lesser poison support is actually gonna be stronger with like a Cobra Lash, for example. So like leveling a Cobra Lash or Viper Strike is actually gonna be stronger. So I might make another like Cobra Strike or like Viper Strike, Viper Strike build. Yeah, this feels actually quite strong. The Viper Strike build actually got buffed by a lot, huh? That is very, very interesting. It's gonna be quicker to stack the Plague Bearer as well. Corralito's signature has been reworked to more directly benefit poison builds, dealing critical strike rather than any poison build. Let's see, 100% crit, chance to poison on hit, critical strikes don't deal extra damage, 30% to damage over time multiplier for poison from critical strikes, and take some chaos damage per second during Flask effect. So yeah, just the dot multi from crits, and you crit more. Okay, that feels all right. I mean, it's still gonna be good for poison builds that crit, but if you have very low crit chance, especially because the Diamond Flask is nerfed so hard, it's no longer gonna be mandatory. Pathfinder's Master Toxicist Notable received a small nerf, now causing poison to inflict during any flags effect to have 20% chance to deal 100% more damage, down from 30, while keeping its poison spread mechanic. Okay, that's fine. I mean, just a small damage nerf. I mean, not that small, but yeah, just a little bit of a damage nerf, but the utility stays, so that's the important part. The overall result is that poison builds should feel far better earlier on, exactly, and now allow for wider selection of viable Ascendancy choices, such as the Occultist. Yeah, Occultist was already alright with poison, so with that buff, it's actually gonna feel definitely much better. Poison builds were also guilty of having a particularly uninteresting array of support gems, which, with most likely providing an unconditional more damage multiplier. We have reworked Poison Support gem to now be called Critical Strike Affliction Support. This support now provides damage over time, multiplier damage against critical strikes, so it can be used with ignites and bleeds too. Lesser Poison has been renamed with chance to poison. That's so bad. What? Cannot they just make another gem and leave? What? That is, so they just remove the poison. So that's actually a nerf. If you're not a crit based build and you were using poison support because you wanted the poison chance, that's actually a big nerf. So for example, yeah, that's so bad. What? Does it keep the chance to poison? Why crit? Oh my god, that's so bad. If it doesn't keep the poison, that is so bad. That actually ruins a lot of different things you can do. Like, there are situations where, okay, so here's what I'm talking about. Sometimes when you play minion builds, you can fit in the build like a 40% chance to poison. So you would get some chance to poison from like one mod on the weapon, like 20%, and then I think like 20% from Herald of Agony, and then the remaining 60% you'd get from the poison gem, right? But if you cannot do that now with this, then that is no longer a viable thing to do, right? So this is like kind of a nerf to adding Herald of Agony to your builds and stuff like that. I don't like this changes at all. This doesn't seem like a buff at all. Like, what does this have to do with poisons? Like, you can just use it with ignites and bleeds. That has nothing to do with poison. Like, what? Poison builds had uninteresting support gems, so we added an extra support gem to bleed and ignite builds. What? That makes no sense, but okay. This change affects all monsters as well, as in general we felt poisons applied from monsters when unthreatening compared to other damaging ailments. However, we have lowered the poison damage of certain monsters that had significantly powerful poisons already, such as the Alhazmin, the Hunter. Yeah, okay. I agree. Poisons were pretty much doing nothing to you unless you were fighting Alhazmin, then they could destroy you if you had no chaos res. So that actually that change does make sense. But this, like the support thing, is kind of bad. Ailment thresholds. Now that player damage has been reduced, we have reviewed our ailment threshold calculations to compensate for the lower damage of fully supported skills. It is now much easier to apply stronger, non-damaging ailments on enemies with less damage, especially on skills less heavily supported. Okay, so you're gonna be able to easier apply chills. So for example, if you're using like a skill that does multiple elements, like let's say you're using a Trinity support, with like the self chill build that does like cold and lightning, half and half pretty much. You're gonna be applying both ailments quite a lot, so you're gonna be like slowing the bosses, for example, and still shocking them. That seems all right. Like, these things are actually not usually that useful. People don't see them. Oh, actually nice, shows 50%, like that you're taking 50% more damage essentially. This will make people actually understand the shock better, because this icon on its own, you're like, whatever, like people don't really notice this, people really don't pay attention, and they die to shock and they don't know why you died. So this makes it so that, oh, I'm taking 50% more damage, I better fucking remove this or something, so people will actually pay more attention to shock. This is actually very good change. That should be in the game for sure. Like, it's funny how the game has been out for years and they finally figure out how to present a debuff on a character. That's so funny. Trigger effect costs. So trigger skills will now require paying their mana cost. In fact, sometimes it now costs more than casting the gem by hand. Thankfully, this isn't very hard for well-constructed characters. I mean, it's true, it's just that damage nerf to, let's say, like a custom crit build, because you're gonna have to reduce, like, you're gonna have to take away one of your auras, or like one of the small auras or heralds or something, in order to have more than 3 mana so that you can still cast your spells or attacks and spells. So this is definitely a nerf to cast on crit, and cast on crit was already like super popular. Some triggers have higher cost than others, most notably cast on damage taken, which previously had no cost at all outside of taking out sockets. I don't see that as being a necessary thing. Like, yeah, I don't see that as being a necessary thing. That actually might be worse, because this means if you only have like pretty much your mana designed to use your movement skill, and then let's say your main skill doesn't really cost mana, let's say you're spending life or something for it, and then you have cast when damage taken, you get hit a couple of times, and if you have it at like a lower level, it might reduce your mana to the point that you cannot use movement skill, and when you're taking damage and you cannot move away, you're gonna die. So this actually might kill some people. Like, I bet that this change actually is gonna kill people. They're gonna have low mana, only enough to use their movement skill. They're gonna take damage from cast when damage taken, not be able to use the movement skill, try to dash away, but they're stuck because they have no mana, and they die. So I feel like that's what's gonna happen to them. So maybe because of that, it's gonna be meta to use life tap support or something, like use spend mana, and also have the life tap buff for that, for certain skills. Some passive results of this change are Archmage now apply to triggered skills, and Reap now gains blood charges when triggered. Spells triggered with Mjolnir or custom death don't require you to pay the cost. Okay. Flame Dash, Dash, and Smoke Mine. Oh, what's the Smoke Mine change? Smoke Mine was most heavily affected. It now gives a 1 second burst of speed. That sucks. The speed starts at 20%, scales up to 29. Smoke light size has been increased, nobody cares. Cooldown of 5 seconds rather than 2.5, and has no cooldown recovery as it levels. Chris mentioned in the live stream that changes to these skills are not huge numerical nerfs. Smoke Mine is an exception. Yeah. However, despite that, it is still very good at achieving the purpose of giving the player mobility and utility benefits. It is still very good for evading damage and traversing across area. Yeah, it moves you. Yeah, I agree. It still takes the character from A to B, but it's nowhere near where it was. Dash cooldown time. Oh my god. Flame dash cooldown 3.5. Cast time is now 3.8. Cast time bypass if not used in rapid succession. Okay, so Flame Dash is relatively fine. Flame Dash is relatively fine with second wind especially. But Smoke Mine, that's a big nerf. That's a big nerf to Smoke Mine. The movement speed that you're losing from this. Yeah, and we're gonna wanna use this a bit differently now maybe, because of how the movement speed is like super short after this. Yeah, we'll see it in practice, but that is a massive nerf to mobility. From what I've seen, they also changed somewhere else. There was a nerf to adrenaline on the flasks that gives much less movement speed. So in general, players are going to be doing less damage and moving slower, which means that Aurabots are even more broken now, and they're not getting nerfed. This is like the most insane thing about all of this is Aurabots not getting affected. It's just, I just don't understand. I mean, I do understand, but it's just very, very silly. Okay, Arcane Surge now provides increased mana regen rather than a percentage of mana per second, and no longer provides an increase to cast speed. This means it now provides slightly more mana recovery at low levels before you've wait, what? Isn't that so it's like flat? So it gives you like a flat number of mana regen? Or what? I guess. Slightly more mana recovery at low levels before you've invested in mana regeneration, and works better with clarity but doesn't apply with increases to mana regeneration at high levels. I don't know if that was very relevant. The relevant part is that it gives you less cast speed, so it's less of a damage boost, so you're just gonna deal less damage again. Fortify. Okay, Fortify is intended to be natural benefit of playing melee character, not a primary defense to invest in. Over time, we've introduced larger values and more sources of Fortify effect to the point where you can almost completely mitigate damage from hits. Yep. We're aiming for having 40% less damage taken from hits with Fortify, being on the upper end of the defensive power achievable with heavy investments, so you can't rely entirely on Fortify. Hence, all sources of Fortify effect have been reviewed, almost all significantly nerfed or replaced with something that is okay to be stacked. Good. Fortify was insanely broken, so now people actually have to find something else to build around. Maybe Fortify is still, I mean, of course Fortify is still good to get, but I have a feeling like this new mechanic, Ward, plus playing something like a Deadeye with Gale Force, with not Second Wind, what the fuck is this ability called? Wind Dancer, yeah? Wind Dancer, Gale Force is gonna be like the meta probably. It can allow you to mitigate damage from hits to like an insane degree, and then you just have very high avoidance outside of that. We'll see. Reviewing sources of damage over time multiplier. This powerful damage bonus for damage over time skill has benefited disproportionately from cluster jewels, taking importance away from other sources. We've replaced all sources of the stat on non-notable cluster jewel passive skills with the standard damage increase to be consistent with other medium cluster jewels with damage bonuses, and lowered the values or replaced the stat entirely on cluster jewel notables. That's an insane nerf to so many builds. That's an insane build to many builds. It's a nerf to Toxic Rain for sure. It's a nerf to ED Contagion, Blight. It's nerf to Poison as well, by the way. At the same time as they're buffing Poison, they're nerfing it as well. So that is a very, very big nerf. To put more importance on weapons, we've changed the large type specific damage over time. What? So what is that? Fire damage. Okay. Type specific modifier on weapons to be a suffix rather than prefix with no reduction in power. This makes it more in line with its intended equivalent. A critical strike multiplier. You'll now be able to obtain a better damage over time weapon than ever before. Huh. Yeah, that is true. That is true. You can have the +2 levels, increase spell damage, fire.multi. Yeah, okay. I see it. You can have that's actually very, very good weapon. Nice. Okay, so again, so that means for spells you'll be fine. For is that for chaos damage over time as well? Right, so that means chaos damage over time is now a prefix, so you can get, oh, that's a big nerf to bows as well. That's a big nerf on bows then, because normally you want it to be a, wait, no, that's a suffix. No, so that's the same. It was already a suffix there. Okay, no, so that's fine. So that's fine. So you still can get like a crafted multi, unless the crafted multi is now on a suffix or something. So you can get like a crafted multi, +2 craft to support skills, +1 to the level of the gems, or +2 bow gems, or whatever you want. And then on suffixes you get the chaos.multi, attack speed multi-craft. Okay. So it's still fine, I guess. So that doesn't really change for that, but it changes for these things. Okay, so that means for something like Toxic Rain, you can now get +1 to all skill gems or whatever, +2, and then it's actually suffix. If the craft, so the crafted one will probably be also suffix, right? So then you have to have a suffix crafted, chaos damage over time multiplier, damage over time multiplier, which is liquefaction or whatever, right? And then I guess like a multi-craft. But what's your third prefix? That's interesting. Like, I don't see what's your third prefix now. Like, maybe it would have to be the crafted thing. If it cannot be the crafted chaos damage over time multiplier, then I guess like added flat chaos or damage or something. That is weird. Okay, that's it. Kind of seems like it's maybe harder to craft that then, because you'd like to put like a crafted prefix. You're losing attack speed, I think. You'd have to like remove the multi-craft and put attack speed somehow. Through maybe... No, Ashling also removes a mod now. So this is gonna be harder to make like a really good bow. Like a decent bow is gonna be easy to make, but like a really good mod bow. Veiled mods, yeah, so this is now Ashling Bench that adds the veiled modifier. Now first removes a random modifier. This is just ridiculous, the way they're nerfing crafting. Like, I think they don't understand what they're doing here. Like, anytime you make crafting harder, you make the top 1% richer, and you make all the top 1% of the crafters make more currency, and you make everybody else have worse builds. So like everybody's gonna have worse builds, but some like the top 1% is gonna have even bigger disparity between them and everybody else, which I don't know why they do that. Like, wouldn't you want the other way around, right? Like if you're a country and there is a wage gap, you know, there is like a disparity between the upper class and the lower class of the society. Wouldn't you want to close that gap, you know? Wouldn't you want to be the poorest people to have some benefits instead of just benefiting the richest people? Yeah, it's like GGG acting like a real government here. Other changes. Okay, let's see. Focus cooldown no longer expires while it's active. So this is especially important. It's now one of the few sources your critical strike chances lucky. Okay, so critical strike chances lucky came from focus. That's the nerf. I think the more important thing is the fact that Fortify effect is so huge on the focus modifier. So that's a big nerf to that. Golem Elementalist no longer provides increased damage per golem. The golem buff effect finally nerfed to the golems. It's a silly build, and I'm not a big fan of it. I feel like it's like an abusive, weird playstyle. Like, is there anybody that really enjoys golems? Like, is your fantasy to be a caster that like has some golems? Like, I don't know. I don't like golem builds. I'm happy they're nerfed. It's just so boring when everybody's playing the same thing over and over and over. So I'm glad it's getting nerfed. That's good. Raider's Ascendancy Rapid Assault no longer provides onslaught. Yeah, so Raider getting nerfed by quite a lot. Replaced movement speed with elemental damage. Yeah, Raider. Now there's like no reason to play the Raider. Now we just go Deadeye, I think. Yeah, I think Deadeye is gonna gain in popularity now. People are gonna finally wake up to the defensive insanity that is Deadeye and how powerful it is. It's just really hard to find the right skills to use, because you have a lot of like projectile damage nodes, and a lot of the other nodes are like pretty bad actually, but there is enough good nodes for Deadeye to be really insane. I feel like more people are gonna be playing Deadeye, and Raider definitely lost kind of like the reason to play it. Abyss Jewels can no longer roll the modifier that grants chance to gain onslaught on kill. This is a low opportunity cost modifier that's no brainer providing strong attack speed. Yeah, I mean, it didn't work on bosses, of course, right? But that was definitely something useful to get like extra on a jewel. So fine, I guess. Everybody's slower. Spectral Shield Throw was used almost exclusively with its threshold jewel. At higher levels because of this, we've changed the skill to naturally have behavior similar to what the threshold jewel applied. It will release all projectiles. I've never played the skill, so I'm not sure, but I mean, that seems like a QOL buff to Spectral Shield Throw. While reviewing the skill, we made changes to all skills that deal damage based on shield defenses, greatly boosting their damage. These skills no longer gain critical strike chance per energy shield, a mechanic that was used very rarely. What? instead, the Divide and Conquer threshold has been reworked and now is called Seething Fury. Provides bonuses to critical strike chance and multiplier to shield charge, spectral throw, shield throw based on energy shield. Okay, so this is... Okay, I like that. So there is still that possibility of building around that mechanic of like crit multi based on ES on the shield, but you have to use threshold jewel and you're using specific skills to do that, and it's not a generic thing. Okay, I like that actually. That seems like it makes it so that you can customize your build, and if you're interested into going into like the crit multi with the ES on the shield, you can actually do that. You have a clear, easy kind of option to do it. Yeah, that seems good. And in general has been kind of buffed. The skills have been buffed and added QOL. So this is something that I like to see. Like skill that is underused being buffed, having more quality of life, and then the options that it had were not removed but instead made available in another way. This is how you buff skills. This is exactly how you buff skills. That's what you want to do. I like seeing that change. This is the thing that is confusing to me. How can GGG make changes? Like, it's obviously multiple people, right? I mean, this is a very, very smart, intelligent, mature, eloquent solution, okay? And meanwhile, some of the other changes, or actually, and also lack of other changes that I'll talk about in a moment, are just mind-boggling how that can be, you know, the case. Okay, these mechanics have been significantly reduced in power. They were too strong. Fire Burst, okay, so Fire Burst nerfed. Hollow Palm Technique nerfed. Val Ground Slammed nerfed, I guess. Blade Blast no longer unnerves on hit, but has its area multiplier with Blade Vortex increase. Blade Blast no longer unnerves on hit. How do I get unnerved now? That is quite annoying. I definitely liked having that as an option for like Arcanist brand that I played. So this is quite a big nerf actually. This is quite a big nerf to builds that used unnerved with like Arcanist brand. It's basically 10% less damage. So that's quite a big hit. Still should be fine because it's only 10%, but still. We have changed all existing unarmed unique items and stats to specifically work with melee skills. The upcoming skill, Explosive Concoction, was designed to work without any of these items. So Face Breakers, Doriani's Fist, Regal Scores, Hollow Palm Technique, and Martial Artistry have been changed. Okay, so they're making it like all more consistent, so nothing can be like broken, combined, blah blah blah. Buffs to underperforming skills. Okay, let's see what are we playing. This is where we're looking for something that is already good, and GGG thought that it's actually bad, but it's really good. Just people didn't play it, and GGG doesn't understand their game, and we find something that's broken. This is the exciting part. Okay, let's see. As well as the aforementioned buffs to almost all skills that use melee weapons, a few bow skills and cooldown traps, we've made some numerical buffs to a number of skills that weren't measuring up their counterparts. As usual, we've buffed Firestorm, now deals 20% more damage. Okay, I feel like it's still not gonna be good. I feel like 20%, that's not the problem with the build, I think. Strike frequency of Lightning Spire Trap now scales with increases and reductions to trap throwing speed instead of cast speed. Lightning Spire Trap now deals 25% more damage at all gem levels. Okay. So, for example, if you're playing like a Lightning Trap, Lightning Spire Trap is now a better option to add to your build as well for bossing, for example. Traps are definitely gonna be strong. Like, people are gonna definitely start with traps. Like, all of the patch notes are saying is like everything is weaker, but traps are still insane, so play traps. Seismic Trap deals 40% more damage. Yeah, it's a cooldown trap though. Like, the thing with cooldown trap is if it doesn't scale the same way that you're scaling something else already, that it would be your main skill, it's shit, right? Like, Lightning Spire Trap is good because you can invest in lightning damage and trap throwing speed and have the lightning trap. right? But the lightning spire trap is like a secondary thing that you're adding there. But seismic trap doesn't have the counterpart really. So unless you are doing like EK traps. Wait, is EK traps a thing now maybe? Maybe we can do EK traps with seismic trap or something like that together. I haven't thought of that, but EK seems like a decent skill for traps actually. Like you can do even EK Nova traps or something. That'll be interesting to see. I might try something like that. Definitely gonna be experimenting with some interesting traps. The rotation of flamethrower trap no longer scales with increases to cast speed. It can no longer be modified. Is that like a good thing or a bad thing? Because it depends like on whether you want it to stay on the monsters or not. I don't think it matters much actually. Shock Nova Ring no longer deals 50% less damage. It now deals full damage to enemies in the ring. So the enemies in the ring take twice as much damage. That's a big buff. That might actually be like the more important thing with this is the single target, right? Because if you're using AoE skills, you only care about the lowest damage that it deals, right? Because let's say you're dealing damage in like a circle, you want to kill everything in that circle. If like some of these things don't die, you have to cast it again, right? Even if half of the monsters died, you have to cast it again. So it doesn't matter that half of the monsters died, they might as well not have, because you're gonna have to cast again and then you would have killed them. So this doesn't really matter for clear, but it does matter for single target damage. Explosive arrow now deals 5% more damage with hits and ailments per explosive, up from 3%. Ooh, that's actually massive. That's actually massive. Explosive arrow was already like, oh wow. I feel like there are a lot of players who understand, okay, maybe not all of players, there are some players who understand like how the math here works, and like I feel like players, like people who usually make good builds like Noogie, like Rise, like Octavian, people like that who make hardcore builds that are like tanky, but they use some kind of a broken mechanic that they figured out and did the math in POB, and now they're like, oh, this thing is broken, so without investing much in it, it's already good. This is one of those skills. This is a skill that doesn't require that much investment. It has already its own multipliers. The problem is just figuring out a way to get all the explosive arrows in quickly so that you can detonate for the full value. And that can cause an insane bleed, and that can do an absolutely insane damage. I have tried doing explosive arrow traps actually, but you need like an insane amount of trap throwing speed for that. So there are definitely options with this, like Elementalist explosive arrow might be something that is played. Deadeye explosive arrow might be something that is played. Definitely explosive arrow, of course, like Chieftain and stuff like that, right? But yeah, this is definitely a massive buff, and explosive arrow seems like definitely a potential candidate for like a really strong skill. Artillery ballista now deals 10% more damage, and okay, nobody cares. Ice Storm deals 3 to 5 cold damage per 10 int from 2 to 4 per 10 int. So that is what, like 50% buff from this amount, right? From this amount, more or less than 50, like 35 to 40% buff. So that is a pretty decent buff, but this thing usually was mostly used as like a trigger thing for people. Body swap has now base radius that is up, but only 20% more area damage. This results in radius 24 from 20, so it still gets higher. Okay, that's not the reason why people don't play body swap, I think. Spark now deals more base damage and has reduced growth. This results in dealing approximately 40% more damage at gem level 1, 10% more damage at gem level 20, and less beyond that. It deals less damage than it did before at gem level 40, but higher or the same at all other levels. Okay, nobody gets it to gem level 40, so it's a small buff to Spark overall, but the bigger thing is that maybe you can use it while leveling. 40% more damage is quite a lot, so there might be certain like speed running or leveling niche uses for it, like for example certain bosses that are in closed areas early on at early levels might be something that you want to use, but later on at like level 25 or something, it's gonna have about the same damage, so it doesn't really matter. Barrage deals 47 up from 40, approximately 17% more damage, 15 at level 20. That's not big enough for that to do anything. It's usually most used for like cast on crit and stuff like that. Storm burst, base radius increased, soul rend base damage has been increased, and growth has been slightly reduced, resulting in it dealing 20% more damage at gem level 1 and 10% more damage at gem level 20 and lower at higher levels, and never deals less damage than it did before, even up to gem level 40. So that's a small buff to the soul rend basically, and nothing else. Storm Call's growth has been increased, resulting in dealing okay, Storm Call 25% more damage at level 20. This skill deals a lot of fucking damage, by the way. This deals a lot of damage. So having it 25% more damage, I would definitely look out for that, yeah. So this is definitely something that we can like expect someone to make a build around. Like, this is gonna melt bosses probably. 25% more damage. That's massive. Like, it already was buffed. Like in I don't know if it was last patch or the patch before that. Stormcall, like, base damage has been buffed by a lot. So this is kind of crazy. Lightning Tendrils, Strong Pulses now deal 100% more damage, up from 50. Still shit. Lightning Arrow no longer has any increases to shock effect. It now has higher value of shock, as though dealing more damage. I don't know if that's actually, if that matters at all. That's not the problem. The problem with Lightning Arrow is the single target. And how inconsistent the damage is. Like, the more targets you have, the better it is, but the less targets you have, the worse it is, and it's a massive difference with how the skill mechanically works. Rolling Magma, damage and growth increase, 20% more damage at level 20. Might be some like cast on crit Rolling Magma builds maybe, but 20% is not enough to make the skill viable. It's just like too slow. It's too slow, and it like doesn't hit people in like targets in the middle. It's kind of weird like that. It skips monsters. That's why it's not being used mainly. The amount of cold damage dealt per frenzy charge on this charge has been raised to match fire damage per endurance charge. This is an increase of approximately 22% more cold damage dealt. The minimum amount of lightning damage dealt per power charge has been slightly increased and maximum slightly reduced, so less variance, which is nice. Split Arrow has now attack speed of... Okay, so that's like leveling, a slight increase for leveling. Flame Blast, 130% more spell damage for each stage. That's actually bigger buff than it seems, I think. Yeah, that's a bigger buff than it seems. That's pretty strong. Yeah, Flame Blast significantly buffed. I think this is a pretty good buff because of the fact that... this is quite a big buff, I think. Like, definitely significant. It's much more noticeable on this because it's like 20% more per stage versus like just 20% flat on a skill. There are plenty of other small changes. So yeah, updates, corrected the node, blah, blah. Okay, so the things that I'm most looking forward to is the fact that my build has not been very much nerfed, so I can still start with the Soul Rest build, right? It's okay. So here are the changes. Here are the things that are actually really, really important. So number one, Aurabots not nerfed, lol. Okay, this is just a joke. This is just complete incompetence. They are nerfing player damage while at the same time, like, something that gives you, something that gives you like 50% more damage, like a skill gem. They're like, oh, it's gonna now also have 10% reduced attack speed on it, or it's gonna have 5% less damage. You know, we're gonna nerf it so that instead of you're gonna deal in general like maybe like 30% or 40% less damage, and you're gonna be a bit slower. You know, we're gonna nerf your movement skills so that you can you know, you cannot like spam them as much. You're gonna have like a half a second more on a flame dash cooldown. This is important and matters. And half a second more on dash cooldown. You know, we can't have you zoom around too much. You gotta be slower by half a second. Currently 2-second cooldown, too much. It needs to be half a second more. Meanwhile, Aurabots, bzzz, like what the fuck? Like with Aurabot and haste, you're just gonna like zoom around like insane, and there's no change to that. No change to hatred. Like the fact that hatred as an aura is unchanged is insane. Like hatred as an aura is still the same for minion builds and for just buffing players. It's so ridiculous. Like an aura bot literally can buff your damage. Like at minimum, it makes you deal like 3 times more damage. And if it's like well geared and well made aura bot, you get like 10 times more damage. Other than that, you also don't need any resistances on your gear because you're gonna have 90% res from their auras as well, 90% all res for elemental resistances. You're gonna get a bunch of armor or dodge or evasion. You're gonna get insane movement speed. You're gonna get regen. You're gonna get many times more your damage, like your damage is gonna be multiplied. This is the most insane thing in the game for many patches now, and it's not getting changed. And people are saying that's because apparently one of the developers that is playing, developers that is working on the game balance is actually playing an Aurabot. He's an Aurabot main, and well, no wonder, because it's the strongest thing in the game by a factor of fuck knows how much. It's insane. Like this is absolutely unacceptable. All of these changes are fucking pointless when Aurabots are still in the game. Like literally these things are all pointless and don't matter when Aurabots are still in the game, because if people wanna just ignore everything, like fuck all of the like, oh, the game is harder. No, it's not. Like if you're playing with an Aurabot, the game is just as easy as before, and you one-shot everything, and you AFK in a simulacrum, and you go do something else with an Aurabot. Like, how is that a thing still? How is this still acceptable that you can have like a couple of people, let's say like with some minions on aggressive, you park in the middle of a simulacrum, and then you have an Aurabot there in the middle with you, and you just go AFK, and then one person just loots stuff. Like, how is that acceptable? What the fuck is this? Like, what is the point of all these nerfs if you're gonna leave the most insanely broken thing still in the game? That makes absolutely no sense. That makes absolutely no sense. Okay, let's go through the other things. So, lowering, okay, so smaller gap between min-max and lower investment build. Okay, this is something that needed to happen. That is a plus from me. Okay, let's maybe do it like this. Okay, this is a negative thing. This is a very negative thing. Okay, let's add more minuses. This is a plus. Okay, I'd even give it 2 pluses. This is something that they needed to do. That's a good change that they made. Okay, let's look at the next change. Melee skills being slightly buffed. Okay, Flask rework. Flask rework is still it remains something we still have to see. We have no idea about all of the interactions because we don't know all of the changes to the rest of the flasks, but I expect that flasks are like, some flasks are gonna be definitely very broken with this shit, like the Corralito, like having having coruscating elixir for 20 seconds, which you can easily get to 20 seconds, is gonna be kinda crazy. So there are gonna be some crazy combinations. Cluster jewels being nerfed is kind of a bad thing. Player ailment mitigation, that's a nerf to it, which is gonna like hardcore. I wonder what hardcore players are gonna say about this, because this is a very interesting change. I feel like some of them are gonna be very happy about this because they're gonna be like, yay, challenge, we need to do more tedious things now. And some of them are gonna be like, that sucks, I need to do more tedious things now. Poison in general, that's actually a very good change. So I will do Poison, I will add 2 pluses for this. Poison, definitely very good change. Nerfing the assassin and making poison stronger by default. This is something that definitely needed to happen. That's exactly what I was calling for in terms of the poison changes. Like just nerf the assassin poison and buff poison in general. And that's exactly what they did, and I'm very happy about that. Ailment thresholds, yo. Let's give them a plus for figuring out how to display a buff after 7 years. Okay, 7 years, 8 years, I think 8 years maybe. Okay, good on you guys. Trigger effect cost, nerf to cast and crit. Okay, nerf to cast and crit, that's a plus. Cast and crit deserve a nerf. It's like people who don't play the game would just copy paste the build and just hold one button and clear the content. That's not I think that's not how the game should be, so that's good. Movement skill nerfs, that's a minus from me. Movement skill nerfs. The reason why that's a minus from me is because this is a skill aspect of the game. Okay, Smoke Mine, Dash, and Flame Dash are active skills that you need to press, and the lower the cooldown, the more important the uptime is, right? So the higher the cooldown, the less important the uptime is, which means a better player will gain more of an advantage if he uses them more often, right? The more they are on cooldown, the less space there is for player interaction and so on. So I don't like that change. And also the fact that Aurabots are still in the game makes this completely pointless and makes everybody else feel worse if they're not playing with an Aurabot. So that's a negative change in my opinion. Fortify nerf, that's a double plus. Fortify nerf. The reason why that's a double plus is not just because I hate hardcore and I hope they all die without Fortify. It's because I actually enjoy hardcore. I like the mode. I enjoy watching people play hardcore, but I have enjoyed it much less because people would just play champion and stack Fortify, and there is nothing else going on there. There is like no interesting builds happening, no interesting new strategies being developed, because simply this one thing was like by far the best, the most effective way of playing hardcore. So I like that because it promotes more diversity in hardcore. So that's really nice. Dot multi changes, it's hard to tell actually. This is gonna be big for sure. It's gonna affect some builds in a big way. It potentially is gonna buff some builds and nerf others, but it's, again, there are so many different things to account for that we will have to see in practice when the builds actually start being made with this. Veiled nerfs, okay, veiled mod nerfs, that's like 4 negative. Actually, let's keep it up to 3. Veiled mod nerf. Okay, less deterministic crafting, more casino, more discrepancy between the poorest and the richest players. Everything about this is bad. Everything about this is really, really bad, and just wrong direction to take the game in my opinion. Other changes, the focusing. Oh, golems nerfed. Golems nerfed. Double plus. Golems nerfed. Same as Fortify nerf. I don't like when people are playing the same thing every league over and over, and everybody is playing that build. It's okay if you enjoy a certain skill and you want to play it every league and you make it work, and you're kind of like an, you're an ED Contagion main and you want to play ED Contagion every league. Go ahead, enjoy your skill. I don't mind. But if half of the player base does the same thing, that's boring, right? Like if everybody that comes to your hideout when you're trading, like everybody comes and everybody's an elementalist with golems, you're like, can I have like, what is going on? Can people like play some other build, It's just so boring. Abyss Jewel, okay, Raider nerfed. I don't feel about it either way. I don't have strong feelings about it either way. I feel like this is just fine. Like Raider got nerfed, okay, people are no longer gonna be playing as much Raider. Spectral shield throw buffs, I'm gonna give them a plus for this one actually. Shield skills, because this is a very nice change. This is done in a very nice way. I really enjoy them solving this issue in that way. These skills being nerfed, that's fine. And then buffs to underperforming skills. So let's do skills to look out for, okay? Skills to look out for. That's gonna be definitely, where is it? Explosive arrow, right? Explosive arrow, definitely something to look out for. Next one is gonna be spark for leveling. Spark for early leveling, speed running. Okay, that might actually be good for, but it's gonna be very niche. Okay, very niche. Okay, because this is only gonna apply to certain builds. Like maybe when you're like speed running a Templar for a few levels, you can use spark or something. Shit like that, you know. Not very important. Soul Rend already was good, getting buffed, but the thing is, at max level, it's getting only like 8% more damage or something. So it's not gonna be that strong. 8% I think is not gonna make or break this skill. The problem with it is the mana cost, and because triggers now make you spend mana cost, it's actually a big nerf to Soul Rend, so I don't feel like this is gonna be good. But Storm Call, okay, Storm Call might be actually really good. Storm Call, definitely a massive buff to this, since it was buffed recently. People just weren't playing it. And then I think that's pretty much it. Maybe Flame Blast, but I don't feel like this is a mechanically valid skill to use in general. Like mechanically, it's a pretty bad skill. So it's gonna deal a lot of damage, and maybe it's gonna be nice for bossing. But other than that, maybe not even for bossing, because you have to be stationary, which is pretty annoying unless you're using it with totems or something, which maybe that's something that's gonna come back. Yeah, so I think those are the most important changes. Let me know, guys, what you think about the manifesto in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching, and see you next time.